What we're doing is we're just exploring our story. And I realized, having just come back from a 6-week trip working with our churches in the Indian Ocean Islands, in the Middle East, and in Southern Africa, that there were things that I was sharing with them there that I had not really spoken to you about. And what is imperative is that we understand we're part of something global, something compelling, I think, something that God has assigned to us. And I started off telling the story, and I got stuck on 2 Brené Brown quotes of all things. No, I didn't cuss as she cusses, but I did quote her because I think as a social worker, she's got some insight on some of the things that matter communally. And so this evening, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to see if we can get any closer to our story. Now, 2 words there that I just want to highlight very briefly. Apostolic household. For many of you, that would be a little less familiar. You may be more familiar with words like denomination or movement or institution or organization. So why do we use those 2 words? Well, that's a whole talk in its own right, but sufficient to say household because we love the relational component of the Scriptures. The Scriptures, not a very organizational, institutional book. I know, or series of letters or library. I know we love going there, but actually the weave from Genesis 1 all the way through till the end of time gives us a relational story, and we are passionate about a relational gospel. Apostolic because, again, at its simplest form, it's the sending. It's the notion that when I come to Christ, God puts me into a global gospel adventure. Every one of us. Whether it's a call to prayer, whether it's a one-off trip, whether it's a life living abroad, every one of us. Meryl and I are, Meryl's Zambian by birth, I'm South African by birth, and God met with us in Hong Kong in 1990 and said, you will spend the rest of your days abroad. We didn't know where, we didn't know when, but it certainly was not on our radar that we would live and die here in America. But our hands are open. God could assign us again. So apostolic is a sending global component to the gospel household. It's about relationships, fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, and us collaborating together on mission. Now, I was exploring thoughts as I do, musing over things. And recently I stumbled onto this picture. And when I go and visit churches, invariably people say, oh man, you should hear about this church. There's such a great vibe there. I mean, the vibe is amazing. And I thought of that great vibe. You will know that not only in the greater Los Angeles area, but certainly true in the greater Los Angeles area, what you have are these wild, crazy people who soup up their cars, find an abandoned parking lot or some area where they illegally go and make donuts. They go and spin around normally late at night when the cops aren't around. They get arrested. But the energy and the excitement is so compelling, they keep doing it. And I realize that oftentimes when people say, man, the vibe there is incredible, what they're really saying is we are super good at creating a lot of energy, a lot of smoke, but going nowhere. No one's life's changed. There's no compelling sense of surrender to embrace a life of faith, a life of righteousness. And I've been tickled by that for a number of weeks now, just looking and thinking, how many churches actually have their own smoke machines? Have their own high energy thing. And I was wondering what these people do. And so there's a crowd that gathers, or so I'm led to believe as I've researched it. And they are all obviously somewhat inebriated and other additional beverages of choice. And as the evening goes, they get more buzzed and they are shouting. And there's this high energy and car after car, boom, boom, kind of get mobilized and make a lot of noise and everyone's shouting. And then it's over. And then we go home. And then next Saturday night, we go and do it again. Or unless we hear of a place where the cars are better and the girls are prettier and the noise is louder and the smoke is more compelling and there's more people, because then we go to that one because this old one is boring. And I'm embarrassed to say it has a touch of church in that language. Oh, no, you better go to that church because that's got a really cool vibe. There are more and more people, and the chicks are amazing. Now, you'll never say that unless a bunch of guys by themselves. And the smoke and the energy, it's amazing. You've got to go there until there's another place that's got more smoke and more people and more energy and more vibe, and then we go there. It sounds horrifically like church in Southern California and very uncompelling. I don't think that's why Jesus died, for us to do donuts in parking lots. I don't think that's why Jesus died, so that we could commit ourselves as preachers of the word to entertaining people. So I did what everyone does these days. I went to AI. That's what you're supposed to do. And I remember vaguely in the back of my mind, someone said something like, Americans are entertaining themselves to death. Thank you, AI. It comes from Neil Postman, who wrote a book in 1985, Amusing Ourselves to Death, the public discourse in an age of show business. And sadly, ladies and gentlemen, the church has joined the pitter-patter of showbiz. Celebrities, highly dressed in the latest gear that are worth thousands of dollars. There was a LA Times, to our embarrassment, did an article on the sneakers of profiled preachers. And I think they did about 10 of them. And I think the average price was in the $400 to $500 range. Is that what Jesus had in mind? Americans are entertaining themselves to death. Is that why Jesus died, that we created an alternative form? It's a bit like going to an 18-plus club. You know, there's no alcohol, there's no drugs, but we can boogie. Is that what we're doing? We're creating an alternative? It's just a little more pure? I think not, dear friends. I think God is inviting us to something far more compelling. Mark 16, please, which we read last Sunday and we'll read again now. As it pops up on the screen, and he said to them, go into all the world. Who was them? Them was every known believer at that point in time. It wasn't just the 12. It was an estimated 120 of them. All of you, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. It's an incredible adventure that Jesus is inviting us onto. It's not the thing I've just described. It is something collaborative. It is something compelling. It is something full of adventure. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name, they will drive out demons. In my name, they will speak in new tongues. In my name, they will pick up snakes with their hands. In my name, they will drink deadly poison. It will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people in my name, and they will get well. After the Lord Jesus had spoken to them, he was taken up into heaven and he sat at the right hand of God. Then the disciples went down. Now, forgive my imagination. I can imagine Jesus arriving in heaven. I hope this is not irreverent. As he arrives there, the Father gets up from his throne of grace and he high-fives him and says, well done, my boy. And they hug each other because of the sheer trauma of the isolation of Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? There is this eternal hug. This Jurgen Klopp hug that they experienced together as they held each other in the sheer joy and wonder. And the Father looks and he said, my boy, you did it. It is finished. You've done what you've done. Now you've handed it over to 120 people. And I think the two of them, Father, Son, the cherubim, the seraphim, are lying, hanging out over the very balustrades of heaven saying, well, are they going to do it? And Peter went fishing, traumatized, until the upper room. Are they going to do it? Are they going to take the compelling nature of this gospel into the four corners of the globe? Are they going to lay hands on the sick and see them recover? Are they going to be bitten by snakes as Paul flicked it off into the fire and carried on? Are they going to do it? And ladies and gentlemen, that's the alternative to spinning donuts. That's the alternative to being compelled by the energy of smoke machines. That's the alternative to what I think is the pursuit of being entertained to death. Eusebius. Eusebius was a great gift to the church. And he lived between the years of 230 and 340. The next slide, please. And he recorded the early church, for which we are eternally grateful. How accurate that painting is, I know not. But what he didn't do, unfortunately, was accurately represent the story as I'm describing it to you. In fact, it could be called the Catholic confusion, or as Guinness, the Oxford theologian, calls it the Catholic distortion, because what he did is he wrote, there are two kinds of Christians. There's the perfect Christian, and there's the permitted Christian. There are those who pursue the perfect way and those who pursue the permitted way. The perfect way, he argued, are those who, like nuns and monks and priests and bishops, pursue a life of contemplation. And he said, if you really want to bring a smile to God's face, that's the way you must choose. But God's okay if you want to be a soldier or a governor or a tradesman or a family person. That's okay. That's the permitted way. God's fine with that. Now you may say, Chris, well, what did that do? Well, since that date, around 300 AD, the lie has crept into and sustained, held its place in the church, that there are those who pursue a call. If I say to you, I don't know, take anyone, Brandon has come to see me and he wants to talk to me. He feels he's got a call on his life. What is your instinct? He's going to become a pastor or a missionary or some contemplative genius. You will never instinctively think, oh, gee, is he going to become a lawyer? Is he going to pursue a life in politics? You'd never say that, because what Eusebius did is sold us a lie, and I'm grateful as a fellow historian that he wrote history of the first 200 years. But this stain of the perfect way is a pursuit of contemplation, of being a nun, a monk, a bishop, a priest. That is the high call, the perfect way. But if you want to be a soldier or a governor or a farmer or a merchant, God's okay with that, but it isn't really as good. Now, you and I don't know the extent to which that has stained our spiritual landscape. Think about it for a moment. If any of you came to faith during a youth camp when you were 17 years old, didn't you hear a call to become a missionary? Because that's what you thought was the perfect way. That's what you thought, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to go to seminary. Even not George Whitfield, who was it? Slavery. What was his name? Come on, you sinners. William Wilberforce. That's what he did. He came to faith. You can have a call to ministry. I just want to confirm that right now. William Wilberforce, 25, comes to faith. He's a politician. His best friend is William Pitt, who would become the youngest prime minister in England. He comes to faith and he goes to see John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace. He said, I've got to go to seminary. I'm giving up my life in politics. And John Newton pleaded with him, do not give this up. Your call is politics. And for 50 years, you know the story. He fought for the end of the slave trade. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the perfect way. That is when we're in the center of the will of God and we're doing what God has called us to, and the geography is incidental. And so we believe that we're all empowered, we are all essential, and we're all valuable to this global gospel. Whether it's a barista or a stay-at-home mom, whether it's an international lawyer or a governor, it does not matter. I remember last time I gave these two quotes from Brené Brown. I won't even read them because I cannot read them without commenting. So there they are. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through the things that define Genesis Collective. I want you to understand this fabulous kind of global story that Jesus has put us on. And I've chosen that first picture, Jesus front and center, because if you remember, that was one of our 24-hour prayer nights. When Noah and the team put that up here, right here, and as we walked in, we had to take off our shoes. Was that? Easter. And remember, we had to take off our shoes, and it was an incredibly sacred moment. It was a very high-powered moment. Everyone who was here was like sobered by the mystery and the wonder of what God did in that space. And I remember during one of those 24-hour prayer right here, everyone put their hand up to pray for 1 or more hours. Right here. When we lift up the name of Jesus, He will draw us to Himself, and His glory and His majesty and His holiness and His power is so amazing that He transforms us. We are not making donuts in the parking lot. That is the most distasteful of Christian experiences. Because it's just blah. It's just bland. Think about it for a moment. Jesus goes to an average wedding. Average food. Average wine. And they run out. And his mother says, do whatever he says. And he says, woman, it's not my time. But Jesus interrupts the ordinary. And He makes it extraordinary. And the leader of the wedding, the host, said, what on earth did you do? This wine is magnificent. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not let your Christian experience simply be spinning donuts in a parking lot, running from one meeting to the next, one church to the next, untransformed, without a clear call from God and the assignment that He has given you. I've chosen Jesus, secondly, not only because obviously He's front and center. He's the source of our redemption. He's the object of our worship. It's the gospel we proclaim. You say, Chris, is that all necessary? Sadly, it is. I'll tell you why I know. For 25 years, from the age of 25 to 50, I was part of founding and then leading with a group of us a global church planting movement. It was extraordinary. I was 25 when we started preaching and we started planting churches. Within 15 years, we were planting churches in 60 nations around the world. It was an incredibly compelling story. Now, somewhere along the line, Jesus was no longer our central focus. Honest? Our brand was. We preached our brand. We told everyone how amazing our brand was. Yes, and other brands are good. Other movements are good. But actually, we'll tell you why we are compelling. And when I saw that, when God, not just me, but others as well, when God arrested me with that, I got on my knees. I said, oh God, I am so sorry. It was so subtle. The message shifted from Jesus, and I won't mention the movement. That became our message. Hi, how are you doing? You must come and join our movement. As if that movement mattered at all. I never want to be there again. As much as I love what we're doing, and I hope you're compelled by it, even if you'll never walk with us, it always has to be second. If ultimately Jesus is not the one we speak about, the one we worship, the gospel we proclaim, the redemption we offer, what we are doing is just, it will end one day. They're just vehicles for the gospel. But when they replace the gospel, God has no obligation to uphold them. In fact, it's amazing when you look at this great anthem, Philippians chapter 2. This is the clearest we get of how the early church worshipped. Who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God. This was the song they sang, at least theologians say. They didn't sing, I feel bad, I feel so lousy, I feel so dark, help me, Jesus. This was their language, the anthem of praise. Rather, He made Himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. That was their anthem. And being found in appearance as a man, He humbled Himself. I wish I could just sing prophetically like Dana or Maddie or someone, and become obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted Him to the highest place. That was their praise, and gave Him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee shall bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That was their lyrics. That was the song they sang. And I want us to sing that song, don't you? I want that to be our message. I want that to be the thing that matters most in all that we do. Secondly, Genesis Collective It started in a house in Laguna Beach. We gathered every year, a group of church planters, and that year, 2017, was exactly the same. I used that picture because I really enjoyed the beach nature of it. Meryl and I had a few friends from different parts of the world, the UK and South Africa and the Middle East and so on, come and join us for that church planting event. And we just said, why don't we get a house, which we did in Laguna, overlooking the bay, overlooking the cove. And little did we know that Saturday morning I get up really early. It's just the nature of things, and started typing. And the more I typed, the more I realized that God was actually getting our attention. Terry was there. When everyone came down for breakfast, we sat down and ate. A beautiful view of the ocean, 180 degrees. And I said, guys, do you mind if I read something? By the time I'd finished reading what God had given me, we were weeping together because we knew this was a sacred moment. What we thought was a gathering of friends, and we love friends. We've been friends since 1981. Ministered and traveled the world together. And some, as you will see in a moment, much newer friendships. But that wasn't the focus. Paul uses this word of co-workers with about a dozen people, and they are those that Paul opened up the nations with. We arrived together as friends, thinking we're going to have a casual weekend together, and actually God started this apostolic household. The reason for this, slide number 3, is to go. And I chose this picture because it was our first salvo into Istanbul, Turkey. We sat together, and we have nations that we were working in the early stages, but we thought, let's go somewhere where we've never been and let's see what God does. And it seemed foolhardy at the time to get, 40 people to go there and to Istanbul. And then we had this little conference in a really sucky hotel that someone organized that was outside of Istanbul in a horrible part of the city. Everything seemed to be all wrong, except it wasn't. And I'll land back in this picture. Well, I'll tell you more about the story. But if you have a look at that picture, those were just a group of friends saying, God, could you do something with a bunch of ordinary folks just like us? Nick leads a church in South Africa. Matt, next to him, leads a church in Thousand Oaks. Rob leads a church in Dubai. Keith did until recently in Kingston. That's me. Andy leads a church in San Diego. And Terry up to in the Pasadena, Altadena area. What could God do with just a bunch of mates who dare go to a city with whom they have no contact, no history, no relationships? The wives were there. Thank you, my love. Are you feeling a bit insecure? You were, absolutely. Thank you, my love. And what we began to sense was these first uncertain steps of obedience. Somehow, when we read the book of Acts, it was God taking them to a place. They stumbled into that place, not knowing what God would do with their simple acts of obedience. Number 4, please. This was a picture drawn at our Albania event. Harry drew this. 2 weeks later, Harry was dead. Died of a heart attack on his exercise bicycle. His wife sent that to me. Because you see, what we felt was that God was joining us together. And he said to me before he died, fit. He was 50, but fit and buff, 60. Ex-rugby player, was one of my brother's closest friends. He said to me, Chris, God's joined us together. South City is the name of his church. And he said, I don't know what all this means, Chris, but Matt Larson said to me, we are better together than we are apart, because providence is the handiwork of God in our life circumstances. And so I thought I had to include it, because he drew this, and X weeks later, he died on a Monday morning on his exercise bike as he had a massive heart attack, because God wants to join us together for the sake of a global gospel environment, inviting us into something bigger, an act of providence. This is not a movement that has come by our wisdom and by our cleverness. This was God joining us together, one relationship at a time, one moment in time, always aware of God's providence. Number 5. I love this picture, Because our desire is to take the gospel to the four corners of the globe. Well, you may ask, who's in that picture and why have you chosen it? See, I've chosen people because I can give you theology, philosophy, and ideas, but I actually want you to see people doing it. The second guy to the left is a Welshman called Graham. Graham's a businessman, always has been. And without any sense other than the nudgings of God, 8 years ago, he started going into Nepal saying, well, I don't know who's there, but I'm going to go meet someone. And he met Deepak. Deepak's about this tall. They continuously butcher him for his size. But you see, Deepak is Nepalese. And he's probably one of the most courageous men I have ever met. He's been beaten up for the gospel. He's been arrested for the gospel. He's been chased out of town for the gospel. Because we can't go everywhere because we don't have language and culture, but we can partner with those who can. On the right is Bertus, an Afrikaans guy from South Africa, and the guy taking the picture is Heath. Heath is Zimbabwean born, married to a Welsh woman, and leads a church in Wales. Do you see what God can do? No organization, no big planning, no big strategies, just God joining people together. And I love the fact that the point of contact is Graham, a Welsh businessman, and Deepak, a wild, crazy, bold Nepalese guy, an evangelist. He goes into town, he plants a church by getting people saved. With those people that get saved, he starts a Bible college. It's the most obvious thing. That's what Paul did when he went to Ephesus. He started the school of Tyrannus, he will tell me. And with those people who get trained for 3 months, they know enough. He says they must now go into the unreached people groups up in the Himalayas, into North India, and to go and preach the gospel, to reach the unchurched, the unreached, and the uttermost. Ladies and gentlemen, that compels us. What about you? There are 2 billion people who've never heard the name of Jesus. Do you know how that compels me? Do you know how frustrated I get, if I can be honest, with people who just want to sit in Sunday after Sunday just to be splashed with a little bit of spirituality? When 2 billion people have never heard the precious name of Jesus, there's a bigger story, and one way more compelling. Number 6. And what we do with those is we create partnerships. Philippians 1 and 4. I chose this picture. I didn't use it elsewhere, but these are church planters in and around our area. Let me tell you a couple of stories. In the front on the left are Nikki and Tony. Tony was being positioned to lead a large church of a couple of thousand in the greater Vegas area. Him and Nikki felt God say, no, that's not what your future is. I want you to start a new community and reach people who've never been reached. So he went to his pastor and he said, I know you've groomed me to take this church on, but I don't feel that's what I could do. His life would be sorted. Large church, lots of money, lots of people. And they started in their home. She works so that she's a realtor, so that he could plant the church with them together. Can I tell you about the couple next to them? They were part of us for a while, but drove in every Sunday from Temecula. Until I said to them, you know, guys, that's too far. Why don't you start a table community in your home? And so they did. Can I tell you about the African-American couple at the top there? Steve and Jamie. Beautiful couple, man. Prophesied over them, a number of us did, and just wept. Power of God, presence of God. Why, you may ask? Well, they're very capable. He's a businessman, but felt God say, go to the poorest of the poor in Ventura County. And so he started a brisket barbecue company so that he could self-finance himself, so that they could minister to the poorest of the poor. He could sit in the gutter with people and talk with them, homeless people, and share the love of Christ and be self-funding. Incredibly humble, incredibly gifted, incredibly capable. Ordinary people who are prepared to say yes to Jesus, to partner together so that we can see the gospel go forth in our city and into our nations. I can tell you about DJ and Krista just next to me at the top. I'm a fan of theirs. He preached here a few weeks ago. Their church is about 80% plus Latino. They're in Belfast. He's got a PhD. He could easily be in a Caucasian English-speaking community, and he would have a church of some size, and yet their heart is in love with people, particularly but not exclusively of Latino descent. Just ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things for Jesus. We're partnering together in leadership growth and development. That's what we're inviting you into. Number 7. Church planting. I'm sorry Heath appears again, but I actually used it because he looks so bad. I'm in the UK meeting with our guys there in a few weeks' time, and I purposefully chose that one. Now, why is that important? Let me give you a few reasons. We're about church planting, you know that. We're about taking the gospel to the 4 corners of the globe. We're about leadership, growth, and development, whether it's marketplace or ministry. We are about church planting. But I tell you why I love that picture, because on the right are Jeff and Jane. She is of Portuguese descent. He is South African, and they are in Lisboa, Portugal. They were part of a mega church of 3,000 in South Africa, led a large student ministry of several hundred. I don't know exactly how big. And God spoke to them to go to Lisbon. Well, that is in and of itself amazing. But they landed a week before COVID shut them down. They're so compelled by their mission to Portugal that they sent their kids, those 3, to Portuguese schools. None of the kids could understand English, and none of the teachers could understand English, and their kids couldn't speak Portuguese. Their daughter, what's her name, love? She's Down syndrome. Pretty severe. A really good reason not to leave South Africa. But if that wasn't compelling enough, the room that you are looking at, which we've been at, is their only social space in their apartment. But they chose to put a table in there rather than a couch, because they want to build the Jesus story around the table. And that's where they love people. There are 2 couples come very curious about Jesus, who every Thursday night went to orgies. No concept of Jesus at all. He called me, said, "Chris, what must I do?" I said, "Leave it. Let's see what God does." They would sit around that table and have meals together. And eventually the one couple came to him and said, "You know, we don't think we should do these orgies things anymore. What do you think?" "That's probably not a good idea," he said. And on the left-hand side is Heath again with his Welsh wife and their 3 kids leading a church in Newport, Wales. It's not Newport Beach, trust me. So why is that important? Because it's a family adventure. The kids are part of the adventure. It's what we do together. And our commitment is for those who go out that we will be there for them and we will walk with them and we will be together, those families, with Meryl and I in a few weeks' time in Wales. It's an extremely compelling story of ordinary people who believe that Jesus could use them and their dining room table to take the gospel into the nations of the world. The kids feel part of it. One of the most humbling moments we've had in recent years, my love was sitting at their table with their 3 kids. And we asked them, "So what's it been like? Going to a school where no one understands you and you don't understand anyone, and the teachers don't understand you." And with tenderness, they shared how good God has been to them. The eldest daughter is an incredible artist, and we said, "Would you mind bringing some of your art? We'd love to look at your art." As she showed us, my love, some pretty exquisite artwork, reflecting her journey from the safety of South Africa with same culture, same language, same age, and a large mega church with lots of people, to being the only one her age in the church and in a school where no one speaks English. Just ordinary people. Number 8. I included this selfishly because that's my house. And as you know, Meryl and I always have some form of residency or internship. Right now it's a group of guys. We do Bonhoeffer together. But that was the last one we had in our home. And you'll recognize Noah and Evan and Rachel and Jonah and Maddie and Josh and Hannah and KJ and Claire, Sarah. Praying for Rohan. He had to go back to India because his visa had run out. That's the gospel. Right there. God training people up for a bigger global gospel adventure. Everyone is involved. Everyone is included. Everyone matters. Number 9. You cannot have an apostolic story without the poor. Galatians chapter 2 tells us when Paul and Barnabas met Peter, James, and John, they said to them in Galatians chapter 2, do not forget the poor. And Paul's reply was, the very thing we did not want to. Why that picture? Well, that's David. I'm going to tell you more about him in the next slide. That's his wife. Beautiful couple who love Jesus. We actually, our 11,000 that we sent to different ministries went to them to help them build another room on their orphanage because he was an orphan. He never wanted another young boy to ever be an orphan without a home. That's Hannah. I went to her, Meryl and I were at her graduation from Westmont University yesterday morning. What do you feel when you see that? Don't you feel the Father's heart for the poor? Doesn't something inside of you get stirred? And the heightened bubble privilege that we have in Southern California, there's something sacred about that. These little boys who without Christ have no hope. It's a cornerstone of what we do. Number 10. I've got one more slide after this, but this is, as the others are, a fave. See, because our desire is to create many apostolic households around the world. We don't want one brand that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We want to see people who have a heart for the sending, going, global adventure, who are built relationally together on mission. But I love that picture, and I'm going to walk you through those men. On the right is Saj. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his Sri Lankan name, last name. But Saj was in Dubai. He'd lived there for, Terry, how many? 17 years or something? Had his life sorted. Escaped Sri Lanka and its poverty. Went to Dubai. His faith got requickened. Ended up on staff with Rob. And his kids are there. His grandkids are there. And he's in his 50s. And he and his beautiful wife, Michelle, were, that's what we're doing. We're going to serve in the church in Dubai. Dubai's just had 2 million people come into the city in the last year. It's crazy. The man next to him, I don't know. Oh, let me finish Saj's story. So God began to stir in his heart to go home. Go back to your people. And he said, Lord, you're crazy. My kids live in Dubai. My grandkids are in Dubai. We've built a life here for ourselves. We got a home. We got friends. We're in our 50s, 57, Terry, something like that. And God, with his inimitable, patient persistence, kept knocking on Saj's heart, and an economy that's imploded, a political system that is highly unstable. And he said, I'd go to Negombo to go and plant a church. The man next to him, I don't know, but let me tell you about Josiah. In fact, Josiah's from Terry's church. Josiah is a cowboy from Oklahoma. Walks around LA with his cowboy hat and his big buckle and his cowboy boots. Well, that's how I met Josiah for the first time. But Josiah came to LA, and correct me if I butcher the story, Terry, because he felt God say, come and be part of this church plant with Terry and Linda, with his wonderful wife, Erin. Josiah went on one of those motorcycle trips around Sri Lanka, and that's one of those pictures where they go and minister to about 35 churches around the island. But why I'm compelled by Josiah, and there are many things I could say about that, but most recently, his house was burnt down in the LA fires. Oklahoma started a GoFundMe and raised money for them. And in the back of my mind, I wondered whether they would move back to Oklahoma. They'd lost everything here. Why stay? Why not go back to the known people and where it's easier and safer and the craziness of LA? Well, said Josiah to Terry, my words, not his. Where can I go? This is where God wants me to be. I'm going to rebuild. Start my life again with my wife and my 2 daughters and start again because of the compelling nature of the call of God in his life. Next to is Rob. Rob's was a chartered accountant with Deloitte. He was one of the youngest partners in South Africa. He was on his way to becoming a very rich man when God arrested him one day and said, "Will you love my bride?" And he left the wealth, not that that's wrong, but he left all of that to go and lead a small church, from partner in Deloitte to leading a little church in Durban North, and now leads the church in Dubai. I'm a fan. It's his daughter who was in Sri Lanka, and I can say much about Rob, but enough for now. David was a terrorist. He was a Tamil tiger. He killed people. That's not emotive language. That's the truth. Until Jesus met him. Jesus saved him. And Jesus put a mantle on him to be an evangelist. And David started preaching the gospel around the island. And community after community popped up. Because David, the terrorist, got to know Jesus. Who are these people? They're just ordinary people. There's a businessman, there's a cowboy, there's a chartered accountant, and there's an ex-terrorist. Who would bring them together? But Jesus. But lest you feel left out, last but not least is Kevin. Kevin's from Huntington Beach. When he got saved, he felt God say that you will live in Germany and help with church plants, but you won't be a church planter. He went to UCLA, played football for UCLA, ended up in South Africa chasing a girl. Sometimes that can work. But he started sending his kids to German school. Sorry, love? Yeah, he did marry her, yeah. And they're still married. Sometimes by the hair of their chinny chin chin, but that's another story. But they started sending their kids to German school. They hated him. They're Southern California kids. They played volleyball, beach volleyball. Why on a Saturday morning when all their friends were playing beach volleyball, why must they go to German school? Well, Dad knew that God had called them as a family to move to Germany, and they needed to learn German. At the same time, he went and learned how to fly. I got a picture from him when I was in South Africa, and I was coming into land in Penang. And he said to me, "Chris, are we planting a church here?" Because in his heart of hearts is a desire to multiply the gospel into the nations of the world, especially where Jesus is not known. 6 men. Outside of Jesus, no reason to be together, as diverse as humanly imaginable. But God, around a global gospel, will take ordinary people and produce the impact. See, this is not those who are given to a life of contemplation. These are farmers, businessmen, pilots. And then lastly, 3 slides that you know well, but I landed with these when I preached, and I want to land with them again. The big picture is Sarah Clay. Sarah, Meryl and I are fans of Sarah. She's 42, she's single. She has a life-threatening condition, ends up in the ER more times than she cares to the very brink of death. But one day she realized she wants to be married but isn't. She would love to be doing a job but didn't have one. And so she took the very thing she knew, which was to conduct choirs, and she started creating choirs for women who had been incarcerated, addicted, or suffered from domestic violence, and started a ministry that not only got recognition, she got an award from the King, but recently addressed the House of Lords in London on how to work with domestic abused women, and all of those women have experienced either addiction, incarceration, or abuse. Let me tell you about the Hansons. I'm moving quickly because of time. Remember when we went to Istanbul randomly? Let's just go. Let's just see what happens. Well, the Lewises were on that trip, and on that trip, God spoke to them about going in and caring for women, refugees, who had come across the border predominantly from Syria and had nothing, oftentimes a baby on the hip and a little bag. That was their sole possession. I don't mean to be awkward, but didn't even have the fundamental necessities of the woman's monthly cycle. And the Lewises put their hands up and moved to Istanbul to start and then partner and now lead a ministry. The Hansons, well, he's a creative guy. He's like a branding guy. And they sat with us, Meryl and I, and said, we believe we need to join the Lewises. Why did the Lewises go to Istanbul? Well, a bunch of us said, what happens if we just go and see what God does? Look at those 4 girls. Portland, Oregon. Would you send them to a place where refugees and all that goes with that is running rampant? Well, they did. And their girls are homeschooled and beg their mom to go into these moments with the refugee woman who have nothing. Beg that they can hold the babies while the other staff, and that sounds even more elaborate than what it is, love and care for the woman and look at them medically and all that goes with giving them a hope and a future. It started with a group of ordinary people going to a city that we had no contact with. And now there's a ministry to those people. We went to Albania. We didn't know anyone in Albania. Now we're working with 5 churches in Albania. There's 50 men from South Africa and Wales going to go and meet with 50 Albanian men because they're getting beat up. Muslims are moving in en masse. They're planting mosques in every town, every village, every city in Albania. The Albanian Christians have pleaded with us, would you come and help? We are getting beat up. So I said to George, gather 50 men and go and stand with those 50 men. Why? Because a bunch of us, some of you were there, went to a nation we had no foothold in, into a country we knew very little of, but like the book of Acts, God dared take your $2,000, $3,000 that you spent with 300 other people, and a whole thing is developed in Albania. Kenneth and Chisholm, they are my faves. Well, I have lots of faves. Both professionals, both left Lagos, Nigeria, to go and do the good life in Dubai, earn lots of money in a city that was so easy to live in compared to Nigeria. That was, of course, until God spoke. And they moved back to Lagos, and their companies let them move back. And then his company said, we're leaving Nigeria. It's too volatile. It's wild. It's like cartel. We're moving to London. You have to move back. He said, I can't. I'm compelled. Doesn't that sound similar? I'm compelled to be here. We sent them money, and now celebrate generosity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what is it that I'm trying to communicate here? Those are the stories that make up our journey. Just ordinary people who have found each other in relationship, household, who have a desire for a global gospel, apostolic, want to partner together because we're better together than we are apart, and to see the gospel go forth and see lives touched and changed. Do you notice how few of those people are actually pastors? They're just ordinary people like you. They have jobs. They have to work. They have to get vacation. They have to save money to go and do the things that they do. But guess the joy that it brings to the Father's heart. Dads, moms, kids, single women who desperately want to be married, unhealthy people who desperately want to be healed. Doesn't matter. But it's an act of obedience and a desire to say yes to this adventure of faith. That's what Meryl and I do when we leave you. We meet with them. And that's what we invite you into. Next year in Sri Lanka, we're hoping to take 500. people to the island. Gather together in worship, in prayer, opening up the scriptures, going to visit these rural churches. You have to get to my motorcycles because you can't drive there. In tea plantations up on the hill in the mists. Go and strengthen them. That's the invitation for you to be part of. It's incredibly compelling, at least it is to me. And it's not what Chris and Meryl do, or Chris and Meryl and Terry and Linda do. It's what we do. It's the invitation, I land with this, it's the invitation we have to say, would you save some money? Would you trust God to go somewhere in the world to go and strengthen, support, and encourage those believers in those cities and see what God will do with your humble acts of obedience? Because maybe you are Josiah, the cowboy from Oklahoma, or Sarah, the single 40-year-old who's desperately wanting to be married and healthy. Or maybe the Hansons, who now live in Istanbul, full of joy. Let's pray together.
Thank you for listening to the Genesis Costa Mesa podcast. To find more information about our community, feel free to visit our website, www.genesiscostamesa.com, or find us on social media @Genesis Costa Mesa.